Welcome to One Play at a Time, presented by Just Play on the Coach and Coordinator Network. This is a series that you'll hear from me all season long as we go through and walk you through exactly what we're doing with Bay High School to teach our players week to week, each game plan, adjustments, and how all those things are working out for us. You'll hear from some of our coaches, some of our players, and you'll hear from me showing you examples on exactly what we're doing to help our players learn the game better in 2026. I want to start with a confession that somewhere in my house right now, there's a stack of 3-ring binders. Some of them I saved, not all of them, but multicolored tabs, route trees, rules, a couple hundred pages of installed offense, organized to every detail. And this is from 2001, my first head coaching job. And here's really the confession part. If I had put a $20 bill on page 50 of every one of those binders, I think I'd have most of my money back right now because nobody got that far. Not because the kids were lazy, but because the binder wasn't going to be the way that they learned our offense, no matter how good the diagrams were, no matter how detailed I was in the assignments that I explained in there in the bullet points. Keep that $20 bill in your pocket, and we're going to come back to it not just today, but throughout the series. It's a decent gut check for whether your teaching is actually landing with your players or just sitting on a page. As I said, I'm back on the sidelines after 10 years of really studying the game. And in 2014, I had connected with Austin Barone. He's the co-founder and CEO of Just Play. I was excited about the platform he put together. At the time, I was using flipped classroom methods. I wrote about it a lot. And I've sculpted together about half a dozen software programs and apps that I was using to get the job done. And it worked, but it was really time intensive because none of the pieces were connected. And 12 years later, I still see a lot of coaches doing that today. And I think something like Google Suite and all the different things you have in that makes it a little bit easier now, but it really doesn't solve the problem for coaching football and teaching the game. Fast forward now to 2026, I'm back here on the sidelines after a decade away, and I'm working with a brand new group of players. And to start, I was doing the same thing. I was opening up Docs, Drive, Forms, some folders, Huddle, and I was right back to where I was 12 years ago or so, and frustrated as someone who was trying to teach the game. I was frustrated for our players and the way that they were having to learn it. And efficiency really mattered more to me this time because our whole staff, me included, has a full-time job outside of coaching. There's only one staff member actually in the building at the high school during the day. And then you add into that a roster that is heavy with multi-sport athletes, a community where family vacations are frequent. So the summer for us was truly voluntary OTAs in the truest sense. Not what some programs treat as mandatory or implied mandatory. So getting the okay from our head coach, Nick Bigrig, a former player of mine, to bring in Just Play wasn't a hard conversation, and it was a no-brainer decision for him. But here's one thing I want to be honest about. Just Play is the vehicle for us. It's not the story. The story, or the thing I actually want this series to leave you thinking about, is that coaching has changed because learning has changed. The platform just happened to be what finally let us coach the player sitting in front of us instead of the player we remember coaching a decade ago. And I get some of the skepticism, and I felt it myself walking back in. There's a version of this conversation where we all say, well, I learned off the mimeograph sheet. You remember getting those and smelling those, yep, and a chalkboard. And I turned out just fine as a player. And I don't doubt that for any of us, but turning out fine isn't the bar anymore, and it probably never should have been. The bar is whether that guy who's deep on your depth chart, the one who's playing 2 other sports and missed a walkthrough for a family trip, still knows how to get his job done well enough to not get somebody hurt on Friday night. The old way was fine for players who can make it fine for themselves. This is about the players who can't, until we meet them where they are. So let's take a look at this in thinking about it as an owner's manual. So if you had a 16-year-old about to get their license, would you hand them this huge, thick document of an owner's manual. Tell them to read it cover to cover, and then take them out Friday and tell them to merge onto the interstate. Not something that any of us would do. And it's ridiculous to even say it out loud. Instead, what we do, get in the car in the passenger seat. If you've had that 16-year-old, mine are older now, I've done this. First, we just get in the car, we back out of the drive. We're working around neighborhood streets, probably pretty slowly. Then we get to the busier roads, eventually the highway. And at no time are we memorizing a manual. They learn by building confidence one layer at a time with someone next to them in small enough pieces that nothing overwhelms them. And there's nothing controversial about that philosophy or method. It's just how learning works. And yet, we go into install meetings and do the equivalent of handing the kid the manual and pointing at the interstate. I go back to that playbook, 200 plus pages. And we tried to get them through as much as we could in a few hours and expect them to perform under the Friday night lights against a defense that hasn't read the same manual. Now, I could say that team from decades ago, they did well, but I realized they weren't learning from that playbook. I'll give you another example. I can go buy a gun. I can take it to the range. I could start blasting away, and I might even hit that target consistently, but that doesn't make me an expert marksman. That's the point of digging into the research the way I did. And it wasn't just to get results, but it was to understand why something works so I could apply it on purpose and make myself a better teacher, make our players better learners. We wanted to take what's in the playbook and bring it to the field, get it from the chalkboard to the grass, as Coach Wiley says so often on our podcast and in our clinics. We want to perform with confidence as problem solvers, not just operators running a play. So I did the research, and let's take a look at what it says. Here's what is actually going on, and it's bigger than football. National and international data on student learning have shown measurable declines in retention performance from the beginning of 2013, which coincides exactly with when smartphones were really becoming popular among teenagers. This isn't just a feeling that we have in a meeting room. Harvard researcher Thomas Kane has linked what he calls learning recession to a fragmented attention. It's reduced reading habits, it's sleep disruption, and it's all tied to the device use. For coaches, this shows up for us practically. Players who can watch film for hours, but they glaze over in a traditional meeting. Players who retain a concept they saw in a 60-second video, but forget what was in that packet that you handed them on a Thursday afternoon. Research on Gen Z learners tells us why. 59% cite YouTube as a preferred learning method. The visuals are processed roughly 60,000 times faster than text. And the players are wired for self-directed, on-demand visual information. And they've been trained that way since middle school, whether we like that or not. So here's the reframe that I want you to think about. The mismatch isn't between coaches and players. It's between the delivery medium and the learner. We think as coaches in systems, trees, connected concepts, as we should, and that's because it's our job. Players receive things in fragments, visuals, short bursts. So closing that gap is now the job. It's not optional. And it's not just happening in our own buildings. NFL teams have started hiring for a job title that didn't exist 10 years ago. Instructional designer, there's a guy named John Vieira. He's held that role with the Green Bay Packers, the Denver Broncos, and now the New York Jets. He's not a football coach. His background is learning science and instructional design. He was a classroom teacher before he ever sat in an NFL meeting room. Nathaniel Hackett brought Vieira with him to Green Bay and then took him to Denver and described his job as teaching the teachers how to teach using cutting-edge technology. At the highest level of the sport, we see teams that are recognizing that knowing offense or defense and knowing how to teach the offense or defense are two different skills, and they're paying for both. If the NFL needs someone whose only job is coaching the coaches, then that tells you something about the rest of us and what we need to be thinking about. That's why the materials we put into our own playbook at Bay aren't purely video either. Some of our players are readers. I recognize that. They want the packet. They want to see that in the text, and we build that The point was never to throw out every tool that came before. The point wasn't to stop treating one medium as the only medium when the room in front of us has never been more mixed in how it learns as it is now. I want to give you an analogy here, a map and taking a hike. And I saw exactly what happens without understanding early on. And back when all we had was a diagram-based digital platform on paper, and I mean back 6 months ago when I started with this team, our players actually showed a decent level of play knowledge, but if I'm being honest, they look like robots out there just running their lines. The second something changed in a drill, a defender showing up somewhere he wasn't supposed to be on the line instead of off of it, whatever it was, they didn't have the answer. They knew the play, they didn't understand the play. A playbook on its own is like a trail map for the Smoky Mountains. You can study that map for hours, memorize every switchback, know exactly where the trail starts and ends, but until you actually walked it, you don't know where the rocks are underfoot. You don't know where there's a stream that crosses the path. You don't understand what that last hill actually feels like in your legs. The diagrams in our playbooks show the players where they're supposed to go, but they don't prepare them for what happens along the way. That gap really came out as I saw one of our early 7-on-7s, and it was hard to ignore. I remember standing near the other team, and between reps, I watched one of their receivers run over to the coach, and he wasn't complaining. He wasn't frustrated. He wasn't even lost in what they were doing. He wanted to ask a pointed question about a leverage adjustment he'd seen from a corner 2 reps earlier. And that's a conversation you can only have if you already understand the concept well enough to notice something was off. I watched players from other programs who were clearly schooled in their system, schooled enough that they could go to their own coaches on the sideline and ask real detailed questions and get into the why. Our players didn't have that yet. We hadn't installed our Just Play playbook. They had a digital platform with some diagrams. They had a few videos on Huddle or in Drive from me, but everything wasn't interconnected. They weren't seeing how the pieces fit. So it wasn't because our players weren't smart enough yet or they weren't working hard. It's just that their knowledge base didn't go deep enough to generate the right questions. They had the map, but they hadn't walked the trail yet. If I look at what changed since I was last in this game a decade ago, it wasn't the game itself. It was the way our players and society in general consume content. So I wanted to design the teaching content in our Just Play playbook so it clearly communicates what we need our players to understand in a way that fits how they actually learn. And that led me to some research on those methods and helped me arrive at our plan. So let's take a look at exactly what we've done. As we got our Just Play playbook, it wasn't just about throwing all the diagrams and content in there. I really wanted to be detailed about how we did it. So our primary pieces, of course, are the video. And we do, as I said, create some of the text-based materials for the players who prefer reading. And truthfully, all that has been made possible and manageable and efficient for me by using AI. Started with simple things like if I wanted a section from an old playbook, which I had all in PowerPoint, I could use AI to rebrand that for me in our Bay colors, put our logos on it, all of that, and even made it better and visually easier to look at for our players. And I use a combination of chat and Claude, and I think you could do either one on its own. Also using AI inside the playbook itself in the form of custom GPTs. And I just talked about that the other night in our AI coaches workshop. So if that interests you, I've got a presentation on it. I'll direct you to that page where you could get that video as well as a PDF that we put together on how to create a custom GPT. And we'll get into some of those later in this series. All the links I talk about here will be in the show notes. So we set the whole process in motion at our first staff onboarding session with Kevin Hoying of Just Play. And Kevin played quarterback in college and then he coached. So I have somebody who's not just sound with the technology. He really understands why we need to do this a certain way and why the things that we're putting into this matter, because it's how players learn. I've got a cut up of some of those key onboarding points on our YouTube channel. That will be linked in the show notes as well. So I want to be clear about something because I know this coaching audience, and I know some of the questions that are probably forming right now. AI didn't write anything in our offense. I didn't make a single football decision through the AI. What it did was it took out hours of the job that were never coaching, right? Stuff that if I had a GA would be doing. So, reformatting things for me, taking transcripts of the videos and creating the written part that I talked about, that we want the writing parts in there for our players to even help creating the quizzes. And so I wanted this all too to read like teaching instead of a rambling voice memo. So I gave it a voice and said, let's take this idea where I share in this video and let's rewrite this script. So that's the same trade that every one of us makes when we do things like use a scouting service. Instead of breaking down the film by hand, the tool changes, but the teaching still has to come from you. So here's what we learned in the research and how we built it. First, we really want to build that foundation. We're building that bookshelf for our players. We organize all of our playbook content into 3 types of video, and it's not for variety's sake. Each one is built around how memory actually works. Again, going to our research. So tier 1 for us is the foundation. These videos are around 5 to 7 minutes, some of them a little bit shorter. I really don't want to have anything in my playbook that's over 10 minutes. Everything is more in that 5 to 7 minute range. And the purpose is really simple. We want to build a mental model. So picture handing somebody a bag of screws and a stack of boards and a giant instruction sheet and telling them, go build a bookshelf alone. Good luck with that. Picture sitting down beside them instead, and you build one section at a time, and then another, and then another. And then eventually you're looking at that bookshelf that's finished. And that's exactly what cognitive load theory is, in a sentence. It's working memory that can only process about 4 new chunks of information at once. For us, that's that 5 to 7 minutes. It's a long enough time to develop that one concept fully without overloading that capacity. Beyond that window, research shows that retention drops, and it's not because players stop paying attention. It's because the brain actually can't encode more novel information without the time to consolidate what has already been taught to them. So every foundational video covers exactly one concept, and we label them as teaching videos. So you'll see an example of that. It says teaching video. It gives the concept. And for us, it's not memorizing plays. It's concept-based teaching. I think that's an important part of that. You'll see that as we share this throughout the season. So a 6-minute video might be on why the boundary receiver's stem changes based on a coverage. That's a foundational video. We're not necessarily taking every single piece of that concept and teaching it. Maybe it's, for example, in our takeoff package, it's just showing them the landmarks, the foundational knowledge, and here's the landmarks, here's why we hit them. Here are some things that can happen and what the defense might do to react to those. And then in another video, we really get into the details of how do you handle each one of those scenarios. So those are the foundational videos. We do pair those with the diagram. As I said before, diagram is a great roadmap, but it doesn't give you all the details. I think the video really accomplishes that. And then we follow all of our foundational videos with a short quiz. And it's not for compliance. I know we think about quizzes as I'm going to check and make sure you did this. And of course, that's important that we see that they viewed that. And Just Play has all kinds of analytics where you can see how much time your players are spending. But it's actually a retrieval practice. And it's really the single most effective tool we have for moving information from short-term memory to long-term memory. 2 researchers, Rodecker and Karpicki's research on testing effect found that a single retrieval attempt after learning improves long-term retention by as much as 50% compared to rereading or rewatching that video alone. So these are our install videos. Players watch them in the preseason. And early in the week cycle if it's part of a game plan install, and when the concept is new. It's taking that bookshelf, we're building it one section at a time. Then we have reminders. We call them quick hitters. So tier 2 in this whole thing is the reminder. These are under 2 minutes, usually about 30 to 60 seconds. And the purpose is to keep this accessible for them throughout the week. Keep it accessible the day before the scrimmage. Maybe they need to jog their memory. Maybe they want that confidence that I know this stuff. So going back to that driving analogy, right? Think about the first time you drove somewhere new. You followed the directions. You turn left, you turn right. The exit's here. You hear that GPS voice the whole way. But after you've driven that route 50 times, you can stop using the GPS. You're not memorizing turns anymore. You understand the route. So Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve tells us that we lose roughly half of the information within 24 hours without re-exposure. So by week 1, a tier 1 foundational piece is days or weeks old if we don't do anything with it. The reminder video, and they get some of this at practice too, isn't teaching. It's a paced retrieval cue, and it's giving the one quick confirmation turn before you get there. And you might say, well, I get that all on the practice field, but maybe you've prepared for weeks for an even front for game 1, and it's going back to some of that install and remembering what do we do against an odd front, right? And so that's that piece that's in there as a reminder that's going to help you. It's not reading the whole route again, and something that triggers a memory that exists rather than building a new one. And that's why these pieces can be short. And of course, the players like that these are short. They like that I don't have to go back into that 5 to 7 minute video and find these things that our coaches put it together for me in these short pieces that, for us, they're red cover slides. They say quick hitters. They give the concept that's being taught on there, and they know that they're only going to be in it for 60 seconds. But the brief re-exposure also reduces some of that cognitive anxiety. The players perform better when material feels familiar rather than freshly recalled under pressure. A 90-second reminder the morning of a game or a couple days after it's been installed does something that a 1-hour install meeting can't. It puts that concept at the surface of the working memory exactly when it's needed. And we don't do a quiz at this tier because the concept is already encoded in the brain. So we're not testing, we're priming. And then the last piece, or tier 3 for us, is the connection. These are somewhere in the 2 to 3 minute range. We have some that are shorter as well. But the purpose is building system level understanding. So a beginner looking at a chessboard sees 32 pieces. A master looks at the same board and sees the positions, the patterns, the relationships that haven't happened yet. And that's what's called schema theory. And it's exactly why experienced players make faster decisions on a football field. They're not processing individual assignments one at a time. They're recognizing a pattern within a system that they've already internalized. They can be problem solvers out on the field. So the connection videos are how we accelerate that development. They explicitly show how concepts relate to each other. They zoom out from the branch to the tree. And the research on transfer of learning is clear that isolated knowledge stays isolated. A player who understands only his assignment executes it, but a player who understands why his assignment exists within the larger structure adjusts when something breaks down. And that's exactly what we want. We want our players to be able to do that out on the field without us. So the connection videos get released progressively throughout the season. You're going to see a lot of these for us are going to come up as we put in some things in the game plan that they get a new look, but they understand all these concepts. So it fits it together for them. It might not even be our own video as we do this. Maybe it's the first time we're going to have to use something from another team, from college, from high school, whatever it might be. But we want to show that connection, that this is how it looks. So as they accumulate enough foundational knowledge to actually understand the relationships being shown, then this really becomes effective. So this is the tier that separates a player from who can execute a play from a player who can play football. Lastly, I think this whole thing really frames out as very much like a flight simulator. So the analogy I want you to leave you with is this, because I think it ties this whole framework together in one image. Imagine you're learning to fly. Would you rather read a 600-page flight manual or spend an hour in a simulator? And Every pilot will tell you that the simulator doesn't replace the manual. It brings the manual to life. The manual still matters, of course. It's the reference, it's the rule book, it's the source of truth, but nobody straps into a cockpit for the first time having only read about it. And that's exactly what this video framework does for the playbook. The playbook was never wrong. It was just incomplete. Those binders I had, still valuable if that was the offense I was teaching. But the video, the quizzes, application, connection, that's the simulator. And our players still need the playbook. But now they also get to fly before game night. Foundation is the first time in the simulator. It's learning what the controls do. The reminder is the quick systems check off right before takeoff, and the connection is understanding how the whole aircraft works together so that when something unexpected happens at 30,000 feet, you're not frozen. You're problem solving because you understand the system, not just your one gauge. We don't just build the content this way. We explain the design to our players at the start of the season. That's one of the first videos in our Just Play playbook is how to learn our offense. It's a short video, I think about 5 minutes long. We wanted them to understand what we're doing with concept-based teaching. We wanted them to understand the framework of this. What are the videos that have the blue cover slides? Those are our teaching videos, or the foundational knowledge. The red, the reminders, we call them our quick hitters. And then the white slides, cover slides, are the application. And when our players understand why the content is structured a certain way, they can engage with it differently. It's the compliance really is buy-in. They know that this is set up for them to learn. They know it's not just coach is going to make me watch this, so I've seen it and I'll just learn it out on the field. They know that there's deeper knowledge here that they're understanding. So they could be that team I talked about. Those players that go to the sideline can have the right conversation with their coach. The conversation for us is simple. Here's the foundational video, or as we call it, the teaching video. Watch it all the way through. Take the quiz. Here's a reminder for us, a quick hitter. Watch it the night before the first scrimmage. Watch it on Wednesday. Watch it on Thursday. So you remember back to why do we put this in the game plan? Here's the connection video. And this is where the system starts to click for you. So the transparency for us in doing it and showing them, like, guys, we've really thought about your learning, really has helped with the approach to the material. They're not seeing it as homework. They know that they're building towards something specific, and they know that this is designed to help them play more confidently on a Friday night. I think a case in point, I had a sophomore tell me, and unprompted, that the quiz after a teaching video was the first time that he actually knew whether he understood something or he just thought he did. And I think a lot of players have that doubt in their mind. Do I really get this? And we see that early in the learning process. So that's the whole framework in one sentence from a 16-year-old. He wasn't complimenting the technology. He was describing what it feels like to finally get honest feedback on your own understanding in real time instead of finding out you were wrong on a Friday night in front of everybody. Most of us have done this tier 1 work. I think I've seen a lot of great installs. And I think part of it is having a platform that allows you to do this in an efficient way. We all have so much we have to do. And I think that's where Just Play excels. We can install the concepts and hope that players retain them, or we can use a framework like this because the installation is only the first step. The retention requires that spaced re-exposure, system level understanding requires an explicit connection. And that's the whole idea in one sentence. We stopped asking our players to adapt to our teaching and started adapting to teaching the player and how they learn, especially in today's quick-paced, soundbite type of atmosphere we have to deal with. What's been great about this whole process is that we release this in bite-sized chunks. We schedule it out through Just Play. And we built this incrementally over the summer. So we've seen that improvement with our players. There's guys who came back for the first time, hadn't been with us, have been playing baseball all summer, but stepped out on the field and could do some things for us. So even if we don't see those kids every day, especially like the multi-sport guys or the ones on vacation, they're still learning our system in the background. And think back to that $20 bill I mentioned earlier. I'm not going to tell you a number yet, but later in the series, I'll come back and tell you what percentage of our teaching videos our players actually finish compared to those binders that I said look brand new when I got them back. The $20 bill could be right there in the middle. We'll get back into that a little bit later. We'll share some of that data with you over the course of this season. We'll share how this really fits into every single week. How do we take some of this foundational knowledge that we taught back in August and bring it back to them? We all know we have those situations. We'll put something in. We might not get to that till week 4. But how do we make sure along the way that we're reminding them of this? So that's what this episode is really about, the why behind it. And over the rest of the series, we're going to get back into how we actually built the install calendar week to week, how we handle the kids who missed summer for other sports, how our quarterbacks use this differently than our linemen. And eventually, when the season's underway, we'll show you how this is working out on the field. We'll show you those opportunities where this guy really knew the play. Here's the adjustment he made because of it. Right? That's what we want. Not showing you that we have these robots running around and doing the lines perfectly, but we have players who can adjust in real time. We want to give you this framework that you can still adjust, make yours, because the mismatch, again, is between how we teach and how players learn. It isn't unique to our program. I think it's in every program. We just want to provide a better opportunity for coaches to understand some of this and how our players learn and give you the tools, give you some frameworks that you can use on your own. So that's the why behind why we build our content, the 3 tiers grounded in our players' actual learning, not just how we've always taught it. And none of this happens without the platform to hold it together, which is why I want to thank Just Play for presenting this series and for being the tool that has made this approach possible for us in the first place. And then this next episode will go from theory to practice, step 1, and what this actually looks like on the ground with our players this summer. Everything I mentioned today, the onboarding cut-ups, the custom GPT presentation, all of that is linked in the show notes. Check that out, and we'll see you next time on One Play at a Time, presented by Just Play on the Coach and Coordinator Network.